Hi, gang. What I want to do is talk a little bit further about the customerform.jsp file because there's a little bit more that I need to explain here before we move on. And first of all, I'm going to make this a little bit larger. Should be sufficient. And change the color and go back to the form itself. All right, remember I mentioned that A1 and A2 all have their own directories or an index.jsp, but A4, A5, and P2 will be using the form, or I should say customer form .jsp, and they'll be all using the same file. And I did that for a purpose so you could see how you could use business logic to modify what is displayed to the user based upon the user input. And the user input is really just coming from the navigation menu. And I want to go back to that navigation menu briefly. Now, you have to make these changes, but they're in global, and they're both the same. Well, they're the same as far as the links, but not as far as parent and subdirectories. The nav.jsp is different from nav global. Make this a little bit larger for you. As I mentioned to you in a previous video, this is nav.jsp, and you want to come out of the parent directory to go into customerform.jsp. As I mentioned to you before, here it is right here. You're coming out of either A1, A2, A3, etc., and then you're going to try to find this file, customerform.jsp, and this is how you would do it if you were in a subdirectory. And of course, look at P2. You're having that query string after the question mark, key value pair, assignment underscore num, P2. So when a user clicks on that, P2, A4, A5, you'll see this query string with the key value pair. Now, why do we need to do that? I'll show you in the logic what we can do when we're using these key value pairs. All right, there's the nav.jsp, and I'm just going to, while we're up here, I'm just going to show you the nav global as well, so you could see that there is no difference other than you don't have to come out of a subdirectory. Again, notice same or very similar code minus the ... /. We don't need that because here would be in the root directory, and this is the root here. This link is the one that uses nav global, so it doesn't have to come out, but it goes into a subdirectory. I go back here, and it goes into a subdirectory. So when I click on this link, CRS XXXX, I'm at the root level, and I need to go into a particular directory here because index and customer form are at the same level. All I need to do is just access that file, customer form, for these three links, A4, A5, and P2. Okay, enough of that. Let's go into the customer form, and I want to show you a little bit more the detail of customer form and why it's important. The business logic of customer form is where all the information is happening there. And you'll see that we're going to use the Java Server Pages tag library, and to be able to do that, what we need is to, as I mentioned in a previous video, what we need is to have the line 2. You actually could put in line 1 if you wanted to. I just put a comment in there, a Java Server Pages comment, not a regular comment, but a Java Server Pages comment on line 1. And line 2, we're going to need to pull in the URI to how we can actually use the core library. We're going to use that core library, and we're going to prefix all of our tags with the C keyword. The C key character. We can call this anything we want to. It could be a number of characters. Just don't want to have a space in there. But it could be anything. The convention is to use C standing for the core library. But you could call it hamburgers if you want to, as long as your tags reflected that. So when I say something here with C, then I want to make sure that I use the C keyword or hamburgers keyword, whatever. But you could see that that's where the C is being used. Okay, a couple things. We're inside of customer form in the one that I have, not the one I provided for you, but you have most of the code as well too. You have all the code here, as a matter of fact, and you could read it and see how it works, but I'm going to demonstrate exactly why this is important. Now notice the HTML comments I have in lines 37 through 44. Those HTML comments here are for a purpose. And you'll see that inside of those comments, I'm going to display the parameter value that is in the assign num key. And how do I get that? Well, I use the request object and the get parameter method. And then when I use the get parameter method, I'm going to say, okay, give me the value that's in the key assign num, and then print that out. How we print it out is by using the Java Server Pages delimiter with an equal operator. The equal operator is short for a print line statement. That's a shorthand method of just printing it out. Well, how does it print it out? Well, since it's in comments, how it's going to be printed out is like this. I have to view the source because it's in comments. So I'll scroll down, and you could see here, param value A4. Okay, just to show you there's no tricks up my sleeve. When I hit A5, notice that the key value is different, and it's going to print out a different value. I'm going to view the source, scroll down, and you can see now the param value is A5. It's going to do that for all three of the assignments, A4, A5, and P2. Okay, that's how we could test our values. You normally wouldn't put this in your code. We're just using this for testing purposes. Now, we could also test it another way, and I want to show you how to do that. First of all, we have to set a variable using our Java Server Pages tag library. Remember, we're using the C prefix here. We're going to use a set keyword to set a variable. Var is a keyword as well too. So we're going to set the variable. And what's the variable name? The variable name is going to be enum. And what is the value? Well, we're going to use the implicit param object. And whatever is associated with that param object from the assign num key, from our navigation menu, whatever is assigned to that key value pair, the value is actually going to be assigned to this variable. So I can get the value based upon this param object using the dot syntax, so object dot property, and that property here is the key, assign num, the same value that's in our URL. Right after the question mark. Okay, so that param object, the implicit param object, is how we're going to capture that. Now, there's another way that we could print this out. We could actually print this out using the out option in the Java Server Pages tag library. When we use the out option, it's a fast, shortcut way of being able to print our values to the page and display them to the page. Many times we don't want to do that. But sometimes we do. Here it would just be for testing purposes. So when I save that and now I click A4, you see that it prints it out to the page. I click A5 and it'll print that out. I click P2 and it'll print P2 out. Now again, gang, I'm only doing this for testing purposes. I wouldn't do this in a production environment unless I actually wanted some values printed to the user. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and now I'm going to show you the rest of these Java Server Pages tags. It just makes our coding a lot easier. Now, back in the olden days, line 46, what we would have to do to get a value is use the request object. Here, the Java Server Pages tag library does that implicitly for us. I do want to say a little bit more about that. Here, I talked about setting the variable. The variable name is enum. The value is coming from the implicit param object that, by the way, it's param. You have to spell it that way, P-A-R-A-M. And the key or the property is assign num. But also you could give it scope. Now you don't have to put this. This is is optional. But this is explicitly saying that the scope of this variable is in the request in the request object. So we're explicitly stating this is where we want this enum variable to be used. Now, going back here, we could use some other Java Server Pages tags. We're going to use a decision structure called choose. It's just simple for choosing. What paths and what files do we want to use? What do we want to use when we're choosing a particular decision structure? Well, inside of a choose and end choose, so between line 52 and line 77, we could use when tags. Now, when a certain value is being accepted or retrieved, we can make decisions. Like, what do we want to put for a header? If it's A4, it's an A5, we could put a different header. Now here we're saying if in enum, the value that we're retrieving is null or 0, then what we want to do is say, hey, we'll show you later on this message when I go through the plain old Java objects, the POJOs, also known as Java beans, and and here our Java bean is a model, part of the model, and our customer servlet, our customer list servlet is actually a controller. We'll show you when we start interacting with the MVC architecture how we're actually employing that. Now, this customer form.jsp file is actually the view. So you could see this as the view. Okay? In our model view controller architecture, the customer form is the view. Later on, I'll talk about the model and the controller. Okay, so if the user gets a 0 or null, then what we're going to do is we're going to pass the normal header. So let's do that. I'm going to simulate that for you. Instead of having a key value pair, we're going to say, okay, nothing has been passed to customer form. Look what happens. What it does, it passes our normal header that we used in the opening of our application. Remember, the main file has the same header. See that? So if we don't pass anything, it'll give us that. But if we do pass something, it'll give us the appropriate header for that particular assignment. Okay, so that's the first decision structure. If it doesn't, in our when, our first when, if it's null or 0, we're just going to say, wait a minute, it's not following the proper values that we want to assign, A4, A5, or P2, so we're going to give you the normal header. Also, if it does give us, if we do get the value of A4 or A5 or P2, we're going to give that particular header. Now notice also, gang, this is crucial. I started the div tag in here, and this is a bit unusual, but I started the div tag using the Bootstrap page header, but I'm closing it based upon what the user selects. So that decision structure, there's only one end div tag, but it's only going to be used based upon what the user chooses. Okay? Based upon that. Otherwise, if there isn't a null or 0 or 4 or 5 or P2, otherwise what we're going to do is just send the user back to the index page. So if it's not any of those values, we're just going to send the user back here to the index page. All right? So that's some of the logic that we're using here. All right. Now let's talk more about our Java beans, the way they're used, and also how we need to compile them. Okay, so the Java beans, as you know, we talked about meta-inf. We're in web-inf. I gave you a web-inf as well too. And now the convention in Java Server Pages and Servlets is that all of your classes must be in the classes subdirectory inside of web-inf. That's just the way it has to be when we're working with Java Server Pages and Servlets. Web-inf, classes must be inside of web-inf. Now, inside of your classes, you can have what's known as packages. Now, packages are just a nice way of organizing your classes. So all classes associated with a particular functionality. Our functionality here is that we're creating a CRUD application for the ability to create, read, update, and delete data. I'm going to put all of our packages that we're going to use into this CRUD package that is a subdirectory. All packages is a subdirectory of our classes directory. So CRUD, and you have a CRUD as well too. You also have a business package, and info is in there as well too. Oh, by the way, one other thing I want to say. Inside of our classes, not only do we have the classes that we're going to be using, but that lib, remember that lib subdirectory? I talked about that before. You need that. There's nothing else you need to do there, but that's so that we could use our Java Server Pages tags. We need to have those jar files there so that we could use those. Okay, back to the classes. We're in business here, and I'm going to open up customer. You have a customer as well, and we're going to do a side-by-side. We're going to do a diff comparison. There's your customer. Here's my customer. I'm going to open that up. Go to the top of the file, make it a little bit larger, and change the color, and I'm going to diff it with yours. So there's mine, and then we're going to go to yours, and show you the difference. And you can see, as before, that it gives you an overview very quickly in gray. Well, let me go through this file. I'm going to make yours a little bit larger too, so you can see that. I got some comments in there on how to compile this in Windows, how to compile it in Mac, how you have to CD first. You can't just compile it in. You can't go directly into the business subdirectory. You must compile it from classes. We'll talk about that later. So you have to CD the classes before you do your compilation and then compile it like this. Okay, let's talk about the differences first. All right, I gave you three properties, and by the way, this is what's known as a Java bean. There are a few distinctions with a Java bean, and that is a standard Java bean generally will use the properties are all private. You're going to use getters and setters, and there's a specific way that those getters and setters need to be named. You can have a public no parameter constructor. Now, here I gave you not only a default constructor, but I also gave you a constructor that accepts arguments. In other words, the signature contains parameters, and I'll go through that for you and show you those parameters that you'll have to add as well too. The other thing about a Java bean is that it must implement serializable. And all serializable means is for persistence. What is persistence? So that we could actually save it to a disk, or save it to a file, or save it to a database. But what it does, it allows the serializable aspect of it. Serialization means that we can, it can be written to a stream in bits and bytes. And by the way, that means it can also be deserialized, which means the opposite, that we could read the data from a file or a database and then create an object from those bits and bytes. But the Java Bean must implement serializable, which you have. I gave you that. Okay? Let's go next. So what you're going to have to add to these properties, I give you fname, lname, and email. You're going to need to add street, city, state, zip, and phone. As you can see on the left-hand side, I'm going to keep going down here to show the differences. You have email, but you also have to do balance, total sales, and notes, again on the left-hand side. Now let's look at the constructor. The constructor I gave you, see that default constructor? For you, it's on line 24. For me, it's on line the comments anyway, on line 24, and the comments for me for default constructor on line 32. I gave you fname is assigned empty string, lname is assigned empty string, and email the same thing. You're going to have to add street, city, state, zip, phone, as you can see on the left-hand side. You'll also have to add after email, balance, total sales, and notes. Now, I also gave you the beginning of a constructor with parameters. Now, you'll see on your line 32, I gave you first name, last name, and email. And also notice what's happening here, gang. Let me just go into this a little bit for those of you that don't have any background in this. Here are the parameters. You're giving them a data type. So par, first name, I call it par, indicating it's a parameter. You can name it whatever you want to, but I call it par first name, par last name, par email. They're all going to be strings, so we have to give them a data type of string. Next, those parameters, whatever is being passed to that constructor, is then going to be assigned to the properties that we defined above, and those properties are right here. Here are the properties. Whatever is going to be passed to the constructor is going to be passed from the parameter using the assignment operator, passed to the property of fname, lname, email, street, city, state, zip, as you see on the left-hand side of the screen here. But that's the this keyword. The this keyword means it must be used with an object. It cannot be used with a static keyword. When you see the static keyword, static, means that there is no object associated with that. So using a static keyword, when we have the this keyword, it means there must be an object of type customer instantiated to be able to modify the property of fname, lname, street, city, state, zip. Keep going down. Again, in your constructor that accepts parameters, or I should say, in your constructor that accepts arguments and that has a signature with parameters, you're going to have street, city, state, zip, phone. As you can see on the left-hand side, you're going to have to add that. You're also going to have to add balance, total sales, and notes. Gang, please be careful and make sure your code, pause the video, make sure your code looks exactly like that. I also have some further information in there. So I gave you get fname, set fname, get lname, set lname, and I gave you get email, set email. What you're going to have to do is the following. So for street, let's go back up to what you got. You were given this. What you're going to have to do is street, get street, set street. They're in pairs. And there's two schools of thoughts of this. You could do them in pairs like this, getters and setters, or you could do all your getters in one spot and all your setters in another spot. Sometimes it's best to do them in pairs, and that way you won't forget one of them. So that way you'll do your getters and setters together. So here's that street. Here's city, get city, set city, state, get state, set state. Make sure you pause it and see how that works. Zip, get zip, set zip, phone, get phone, set phone. You have email. I gave you that. And so the next one is going to be balance, set balance, get total sales, set total sales, and then finally you're going to have to do the notes as well too, because I didn't give you notes in this one. So let me go back up here and do a previous so you could see it highlighted. And let me go to the code. Balance, you'll need set balance, get total sales, set total sales. No, there's no spaces, gang. And it has to be, and get notes, set notes, right here. And then finally the end of that class. Okay? But one thing that I want to make sure that you're aware of when you do this, that whatever you named your property, the convention is, and it must be like this for Java Beans, that the first character of your getter and setter, the first character must be capitalized. So let's take a look. An F name, L name, street, city, state, zip, phone, email, balance. Notice that the first character is capitalized. So get, in the property, it's lowercase, right? Get F name, all lowercase, right? But we can't do that with our getters and setters. The first character after the get or set keyword, get and set are all lowercase. But the first key character, first character of that property has to be capitalized. Get F name, capital F, capital L, capital S for street, capital C for city, capital S for state. But look at total sales, gang, because our balance is capital B, but look at total sales. Now be careful with this one. In our property, we said total sales was lowercase total, capital S. As I mentioned to you, the first character of that property, since ours is in lowercase, the getter and setter has to be uppercase. So the T is going to be capitalized. Let's go back up and take a look at that. Notice total sales, lowercase t. Our getter and setter must be capitalized. All right, gang, that is the model. By the way, again, we're using the model view controller, and our model is going to be representative of the data. So here we have data that's going to populate the first name, the last name, the street, city, state, zip, when it's passed to a constructor or to a getter or setter. That's the data. And then later on, you'll see how we're working with a database. So we'll have a database model too. Our first Java Bean is customer. Later on, we'll have a customer DB. DB for database. We're going to have that as a model. And again, we're going to interact the customer object with our customer DB object, navigating, or not navigating, but transferring data from the database to the class, and then our controller, that I'll show you in another video, customer list servlet, is going to be working in combination between our customer class, which is not compiled yet. You don't see a customer class. I'll show you that in another video. And in the next video, we have a package called info, and inside of info, we're going to be working with the customer list servlet. Now, this test servlet is just for testing purposes. I'll show that as well, too. But those two files, the model being customer, the controller being customer list servlet, is going to work with the view. And our view is customer form. All right, gang. We'll talk more about the model view controller architecture in another video.